I got the idea for this poem and for this entire workshop during a Thanksgiving gathering that I had with Olga. So it was there at her house when well, my sister and I were playing with her cats that I realized that a lot of animals in our lives, they kind of like live with us and they live with us in that private sphere. And so I was thinking about how we can use knowledge and experience of the animal to kind of represent, moments of trauma and moments of pain in our lives. As everybody here has probably felt, what with the trouble of last year. And and so one of the things that I kind of wanted to reflect upon is like a difference or change in perspective, because I think we've all had it up to here with like staying at home. So I wanted to kind of see how it would be different from the eyes of an animal. The cat as we're leaving. I crouch behind the couch, behind the sofa, between curtain and palm frond. Houseplants everywhere spread their alien shadows on trunks and stray clothes. Out on the street, the twilight elongates as luggage is packed, as orders are barked, as someone's vacation home burns on TV. Maybe you'll take me up in your arms to whatever weird and weightless city dominates your strange mind this day. You and the littler one, still big enough to carry me. You and the man who smells like aftershave and nervous sweat of both the lion and the cornered mouse. You throw my toys in the hamper. You do not think I can open the dryer, but I've been practicing. Officers arrive, they pound on the door, and you are notified. It's like they were always there, standing on the front step, a shadow that won't go away, a weight measured out in footprints of ink, shoes spooning out each sand mound of darkness. Is it right for me to believe in fate? What right? Most days I whine for food, for attention. I chitter and flip my ears if given too much or too little. You spoil me, and I deign to love you back. Most days I worry about nothing. Naps, a warm seat, whether you operate the hum box, the book of warmth, or the dreaded hose of howling. I never thought I would ever be so free as to miss you torturing my toe beans with your Chinese interrogation techniques, with your stupid baby voice. I know I have no dignity in this house. I need you. As much as I like to pretend otherwise, who else was going to play God for me? Who else was trying to be my world? I have no dignity in this house. I just never figured, but neither did you. The soldiers come. One final time, you are heading out. Tears already salting your cheeks. You pick me up and put me down. I remember how you forgot to feed me. Anything other than the sea on your cheeks. Okay, so this poem is essentially about a pet being abandoned. And so a lot of the times when you look at the details and the images of a poem, you really want to like zoom in on like the particular details of the setting of the character and who it's coming from. And so one of the challenges that's facing us all as writers is how to compress information about setting, about speaker, about perspective, about time into a space that also allows for a narrative to unfold, how it allows for like, the particular like emotional state of mind to emerge. And so I guess one of the key things that I think that I feel was successful about this poem is the perspective of the speaker. And so what I would like to add is that the speaker and the animal subject are the same. And so there is a particular effect with removing that barrier between the human voice and the animal experience. Now, I really wanted to kind of show you guys more examples of like poems where they fully inhabit the mindset of an animal. But because I did not have like access to the poems that I wanted to find, I guess these three kind of show you the possibilities of animal speaker or an animal as subject in a poem. And so I guess one of the things I want you guys to reflect upon is like what do you feel is successful about this poem? What do you feel is good at conveying the emotion?
Well, because I've seen this one before, and I know we were talking about basically Manzanar, I believe, right? And the Japanese internment camps, and basically leaving. I don't know how I got there, but I remember when you sent me this, I got emotional. I was trying my best not to cry right now, but I think the fact that it's like as someone who is a pet owner who's I've never had more pets out more than this. They've always run away or died, and I know that's sad. But I don't know if you could scroll down. I think for me, it's like as soon as you say like I dine, you spoil me and I dine to love you back, and then after that, it's just um, like obviously it's a cat, and then I love the book of warmth, the dreaded hose of howling, and after that you get to the like the sadder part, be like the soldiers come, right? And you get hints of that throughout the poem, but now you know that the soldiers come one final time. And I feel like it's already a bummer because you have those hidden like, oh, the Chinese interrogation techniques, like small little things like that, that you're like, oh, like something's happening like in the underwater of this poem. And But we're getting the surface of the cat, of his voice, but then you get the ending, the sea of on your cheeks, and that just like I'm trying to hold myself together. I want to go get my cat, but that makes me really, really emotional because it's true. Like where do these it leaves you with questions. Where do these cats go when left behind? You know, or our pets go when left behind.
Thank you for
Yeah,
that.
it really
Eh,
was almost like a child, like how the level of understanding. I think it's a little bit too human for a cat, but the way the cat doesn't get the whole situation, just views it from a selfish perspective. I think it's more reminiscent of a child narrator. But like you said, it's yeah, it's under the surface thing. And also what I noticed, the most emotional moment for me was the I didn't I didn't think I would miss you or something in the middle, like the with the torture of toe beans that part, like how even if we are really abused, there are some moments where we are suddenly free and then we miss the abuser afterwards. I think I can speak for everybody that we already experienced that when like parents died, like the general feeling is that yeah, finally I can do whatever I want, but then you're like, okay, and who do I fight against now? What's my purpose?
That's right. With the kind of loss that is being displayed in this poem, but also in many people's lives, there can be that moment where, once that opposition gets removed and all that pain and anger and loss has nowhere to go, it kind of like bends backward and it's reflected back to the person it originated from. And then so in that way, kind of those emotions and those feelings can kind of act like a curse. They originate from you, and now because you're like their parent, they kind of like fight back against you. And so one thing that I really want for everyone to take away is how details, no matter how small, when they're layered on top of each other, like in these three poems, they build deeper depths of meaning. So we can easily build a single layer of meaning by using a simple declarative sentence. But when we bring in implication, when we bring in time, when we bring in like character and context, that's what gives, you know, a simple statement of fact, like you forgot to feed me, something deeper than just, you know, one level of meaning. That's how you bring out emotion in all its different shades. And so let's take a moment to begin writing. So we know that, you know, these three poems kind of like use a single sort of like focus, right? They use animals to kind of contextualize and transform the way we think about the human experience. And they kind of let us know our place in nature, or rather nature's place in the human world. And so there's a lot that this particular subject or this particular approach can do for us as poets. So why don't we take a moment to brainstorm some different kind of animals that we could use as subjects? Like, I know for sure cats, dogs, fish, obviously. So what are some specific animals that are in your guys' life that you think would work well as a subject or as a speaker in a poem?
I was personally thinking about a dog. I don't own one, unfortunately, even though I really want one. But my neighbor has one, and even as we were just going through some of these poems, things were going through my mind about how I can use this. Like you mentioned, how certain people embody the animal and stuff, and I was kind of getting that vibe. Like, okay, like how can I take the dog and then like embody that and create a narrative? So that's what my mind is right now.
That's a great suggestion. And let's explore that idea a little bit. Like, let's say you do pick like the dog as like the speaker of your poem. And you can always tweak the degree of separation between the speaker and the animal. Because like Lila critiqued earlier with the cat poem, it can be difficult to inhabit and fully produce a believable like portrayal of an animal's mindset because we essentially don't have access to an animal's or non-human animal's interiority. So we try to approximate as best as we can. And so that's part of what's wonderful about the workshop experience. Not only do you guys get like instruction and like advice on how to write and suggestions, but I also get critique for my own poems as well. So you had a great suggestion with the idea of the dog. And if you wanted to bring it further, you can think about specific breeds. You could think about what are some specific mannerisms. Sorry, just let me write that down.
Like I'm thinking about the dog from Up, Doug, who they do portray him kind of like childlike, like squirrel, and then like just very like short. There's like a short memory and very childish. But I was thinking, my friend has horses, and she loves her horses, and like I think her name is Oreo, the horse. And she she's like, oh, she's so like she's stubborn, and I'm like, oh, okay, so you know your horse is like very specific. She's like, oh yeah, she's very stubborn, she's a diva. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I mean that can happen. I know my cat has an anxiety eating because I'm an emotional eater, but sometimes I find my cat just eating out of nowhere sometimes, like dry kibbles I left on the floor, and I'm like, oh, he's eating out of anxiety just like his mom.
Horses are a great like suggestion. There's actually a really good horse poem called A Blessing by James Wright. So I didn't choose to use that poem as an example, but you guys can totally look into like other examples of horses as speakers or horses as subjects, because we don't have to just look at poems. We can also look at, as Olga mentioned, our own personal lives, our own personal connections, because like oftentimes that's where you find like the richest vein of like information with which can be transformed into a poem. But you can also look, like with Olga mentioned again with Doug, into popular culture, representations of animals that you've seen, you know, throughout media. And so A Blessing by James Wright is a good example of a horse. Who's seen the animated film Spirit? It was during the late Disney Renaissance, I think like towards the second Dark Ages when they weren't making as much money. But it's a story about like a wild stallion who gets tamed. And so you might want to think about different places where animals have been represented and use that as a model for your own poem. Because remember, you do not have to just stick to poetry in order to write a response poem. You can write a response poem to literally anything. Because anything you can think of can be responded to, anything can become a poem by responding to it. Make sense? Okay, so we got horses, we got dogs. Anybody else? Any other kind of animals that you think might make a great subject?
I'm kind of getting started on the idea of a lion as a response poem to the fish.
A lion in response to the fish?
Yeah, because you cannot always afford to let your catches go, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Sometimes in a confrontation with nature, sometimes in a confrontation with sort of an outside world, it inevitably spirals into conflict, which is a really interesting take, Willa.
You were talking about pop culture. I was thinking about Bojack Horseman. I put it on the chat, and also Arthur. I was like, is that full of animals that talk like humans?
So yeah, with the two properties that you mentioned, Olga, they're definitely animal people, so to speak. And so in that sense, the animal part is dialed back, and perhaps the animal functions more as a sort of like representation as a human. But that's totally a direction in which that this prompt can go in. Because after all, humans have been using animals as representations of the other, of the divine, of of simply ourselves for a very long time. Egyptians were the first furries.
Like different characteristics as well. Like there are these ideas that the fox is the clever one, the whatever, the rat is the sneaky one, and things like that.
Yeah. So definitely, depending on the animal that we choose, they can bring out any number of human characteristics. So now we've got our brainstorm. Now it's time to think about setting. What are some places that the animals would inhabit? Or, what are some different stages that the animal would find themselves in? So
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay.
You want me to go? I'm thinking about like the reptiles in holes. They were in the desert. Or Animal Farm, the George Orwell novel. They were in a farm.
That's a great example.
When I was thinking of mine, I was thinking like because you mentioned even like a species specifically for a dog. I was thinking like a German Shepherd and stuff, and then I was thinking like a police dog or something.
That's a great example. So like a German Shepherd working on the force. Like if there was a protest poem that took on the sort of like perspective of a police dog, I think that would be a deeply moving sort of perspective, and definitely one that kind of like represents like because I feel like with protest poems there is a difficulty with when it comes to like empathizing, because oftentimes with protests and with political activism we are trying to push forward a worthy cause, and that inevitably sometimes means going into conflict with others. And so one of the great things about poetry is how it can transform conflict or transform our perspective on conflict. So German Shepherd in a as a police dog.
It's funny. I feel like you're in my head because that's what I was thinking. It's just like as you mentioned the conflict where it's just like the dog is being given an order, but that order, like thinking about like past and stuff like that, thinking about in terms of like civil rights and stuff, like dog is being told to attack and stuff, and it's just following orders. It doesn't understand that this is a bad thing that it's doing. Like in his mind, he's thinking, "Good boy, because I'm obeying my master." But it's just like your master's telling you to do something evil. That's like where my mind's headed.
And that's a really great way of
Uh,
exploring morality within a political context, because
yeah, and
with the
when you said
incomplete information in
like,
an animal's perspective, oftentimes that means an inability to have the same sort of morality as us humans.
yeah, when you said this conflict thing and protest thing, and how it could relate to animals, it was like, um, I was thinking of, for example, when somebody calls like pest control or something, and like if you find a raccoon in your house and wrecking the place, and you want them to be taken away, but he might be thinking, okay, but I was here first. So it could be like indigenous rights.
It's a great sort of like there's a great potential in that example for allegory, because in many different nations right now there is currently a housing crisis, and I think it would be a great way to explore the sort of like condition of the marginalized, the conditions of those who have been dehumanized and thought of as lesser, by using the animal as allegory. And again, this is borrowing from a much larger and longer tradition of poetry and literature than we might think, because animals have always been used as allegory. And we have always tried to see ourselves from another perspective, oftentimes from the perspective of an animal, in understanding and unpacking complex issues in our society.
And also it can come to the fact that humans are animals themselves. So
Right. It's a wonderful way of kind of like reconnecting with the fact that we are not just people, we're products of nature. And although we are definitely products of nature, it helps us to reflect upon the degrees of separation that we have willingly and voluntarily put between ourselves and our, you know, the rest of our community, which is the natural world. So this has been a great brainstorm. We only have like probably 13 minutes at most, but why don't we continue into thinking about like drafting? So using some of the material that we gathered from the brainstorming, from the examples that we read, now let's think about the different methods of writing. So you can easily try to free write this. So my recommendation is to like just pick a particular animal, pick a particular context, and then just start writing immediately as for as long as you can. Try to generate as much material. If it helps to put on a timer or to give yourself some sort of limit, like you have to fill up this one page or you have to fill up these 2 pages, because that helps to breed a sort of like creativity, and that the restraint or the rule or the limitation helps to give you form and structure. Another thing that you can try to do is to try to keep fleshing out the outline. So you follow along with the outline that has been provided, or you try to customize the outline for yourself. Use the outline as a tool, not as like a, you know, a template. Use the outline to kind of like build the world of your poem. I think one of the things that helped me write when I was writing my poem is, you know, trying to understand and stage out the different places that my speaker could go, trying to picture the world of that speaker, of the cat, and understanding the different scenarios and imagining them in my mind. Another thing that you can use. So use the model poems as a foundation for your own writing. So you pick a line that you really like, or you pick a line that really resonated with you, and you try to write a line in response to that. And then it's another sort of variation on free writing. You essentially pick something or some part of the poem that, you know, resonates with you, and you try to see what you can build out of it. And if one line isn't enough, you pick another. If one section of the poem just doesn't seem to be giving you as much, then you try to continue on. And remember, you don't have to use these methods separately. You can use them together. You can use any combination of them. Use whatever you have at your disposal to, you know, push past that, you know, myth of writer's block. Because in reality, there is no writer's block. There is only what we have to say and the things that we put in front of us to keep ourselves from saying it. So with that out of the way, one last thing that I would like to say, remember that everything that we've kind of gone over here, everything that I've like taught you guys is really just suggestion. It's really just an opening or an invitation into an art many of you have already kind of participated in and successfully achieved things for yourselves. So I want to take this moment to kind of remind everyone what the freedom of poetry is, because you don't need to follow any particular set of rules or any particular approach to write a great poem. And many of us here have already sort of written poems that are, for us, good poems. And so what I want to remind everyone is that even though you don't need any rules to write, like you don't need to follow any specific rules to write good poems, you can choose whatever kind of rules you want to follow in order to write great poems. Okay? So that's the freedom of poetry, that you get to choose what you want, that what you get to choose what's important to you, and you get to choose what limitations are going to structure and form your poetry. So with that out of the way, any questions? No? Okay. I guess for now, that'll be the end of today's workshop. It is 8 o'clock. And if anyone else has anything they'd like to say, my ears are open. But if not, these prompts are for you guys. These instructions and these methods are for you guys. So take them and do with them what you will. I hope that they help you. I hope that you get some poems out of them. And I hope that everything we talked about today, brings you some sense of fellowship. None of us are alone in our endeavors to write poetry. All of us are connected by the fact that we're writing poetry. And I hope that, inspiration follows you all.